it's really important when you think about yourself in a relationship is one, when you typically speak honestly, is it to get at that person or your partner? And then secondly, when you do get feedback from your partner, what is your typical response? I know you want me to be honest, but you even said on top of that, that that's just who I am. I use stuff from the past. I bring things up from the past. So then I'm like, well, then I don't want to say it.
I felt exactly the same way. I don't want you to internalize something that would hurt your feelings, especially on something that's a sensitive topic, as well as be used against me.
Are you doing this because it's going to make you feel good, or are you doing it because you think it was be impactful for that other person? Welcome back to Over Dinner. I'm Jarrod.
And I'm Dr. Nikki. We're not experts. We're just two people doing the work together and apart.
Sharing real and unfiltered conversations about the human experience.
You know what I just noticed?
What?
Look at the different colors of our coffees.
Yeah. I don't put anything in mine.
Yes, you do. Sometimes.
Sometimes.
You put
turmeric
or
sometimes
Fairlife shake.
Some little bit of Fairlife shake. Get a little chocolateness.
Yeah, and protein.
Protein.
Yeah, I don't really drink coffee anymore. I kind of just went cold turkey on it. It was like such a habit too, and I just stopped. For somebody with Hashimoto's, it's better to avoid caffeine in coffee. So I've been really trying to make a genuine effort there, because in other areas I feel like it's totally slipped, like gluten-free.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I'm really curious what you think. Like, do you feel like I try to be mindful of being gluten-free, or do you feel like I don't really try that hard?
I think you have moments of it.
Is that your honest answer?
It's honest. Yeah, I think there's moments where you're more aware, and there's sometimes, but I also think in certain circumstances, like it's okay not to think about it. Like you don't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
Right? There's always more you can do. There's always perfect, but I don't think if that's ever your goal, then you're gonna fail every time. So I think there's moments where you're like, I need to be more on this, and you are. And then sometimes it just slips, or there's family time, or it's holidays and all these things where it's like you're gonna be as good as you can, but you also don't want to like not have the experience.
I mean, it'd be different if I like had a celiac disease, right?
Yeah.
But I was just thinking about honesty in relationships as you were talking, and like, what is that line, right? Because this is supposed to be your closest relationship that you have, and so, or at least in my perception, it is the closest relationship that you have. And the other day I was watching Firefly Lane. I don't know if you've ever seen the whole thing, but I think so. In the series, it's a 2-series show on Netflix. Kate and her husband Johnny, they go through a divorce. And when after they reconcile? Is that reconcile?
Reconcile. Yeah.
Once they reconcile, they have this moment where they're talking about why their marriage didn't work. And part of it was that they weren't honest with each other about certain things. Like Johnny had aspirations of doing some like real work journalism, like going to Iraq and like doing some things. And he didn't tell Kate about his frustrations of kind of going through the day to day. And so in this exact scene, they go back and forth and talking about all these things that are really honest. Like, I hate your meatloaf. I hate this thing. I don't want to spend time with your mother, kind of things. Like, they talk about being that radical honesty. And I'm really curious to explore what honesty means, because we also had a conversation about this just recently.
Yeah.
About honesty.
That's about in therapy too.
Yeah. It's just like, what is the line?
Yeah.
What is the value? Are there some things that you shouldn't be sharing? Should you be sharing everything? Mm-hmm. So I'm curious.
I'm curious on our each perceptions of it. Yeah. I think it's probably different.
Okay.
Right.
So why don't you go first?
I think it's evolved. I don't think you have to share everything and anything if it's not beneficial to the other person or to the relationship.
So I'm curious. I'm just like digging into this.
Yeah.
Because I'm not debating. I'm curious. So like, there have been times in my career when you know that I was just in my own way.
Yes. And
I would like complain about things, or I'd be frustrated or emotional or whatever it is about specific instances. And you weren't quote unquote honest. And you've later told me that you have been more honest, where you'd saying like, you're in your own way, or like, this is the way it goes. But you didn't want to say those things because you didn't want to hurt my feelings. Yes. But in my opinion, you not sharing that with me is actually it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's
Lying?
no, it's not lying. It's that I have the expectation in this type of relationship, as deep as this
Yeah.
relationship is that you would be the one person that I can count on for telling me what I need to hear. And maybe that's what I was about to say is
Yeah.
what I need to hear instead of it being masked. Because you're going to go out to the world and you're going to build all these relationships that are superficial. They're not going to have that much depth, but they are acquaintances and they're nice relationships and so forth. But if you were to ask them, like, oh, do you think I should go and do this? Or I've been thinking about this idea, and someone says, oh, yeah, you'd be so good at that. But in their head, they're thinking, that sounds fucking horrible, or
Yeah.
you would not be good at
But
that.
I think the example you gave, because I thought about this when I was also meeting people, is like, when do they need to figure that out for themselves? It's more important that they figure that out versus if they trust me and they're gonna whatever I say, they may go do and just take that and not put some thought into it itself. I think there's a balance of that too, because sometimes people need to experience and come to that conclusion themselves. It's actually more beneficial for them. Right. And there's moments for sure. Said it plenty of times in this podcast, but I'm working on it in therapies. I'm a people pleaser. So if I think something's going to hurt, probably more in the past, if I felt something was going to hurt you, I was probably reluctant to say it because I didn't want two things. I didn't want to hurt you, and I didn't want the uncomfortable emotions I would feel based off how you might respond.
What was the thing that you said the other night? You said, I was worried that you would internalize this
Mhm.
and that you would use it against me.
Yes, I've thought about that because I do have experience of that happening in our relationship where I've said something, you have internalized it, and it's got brought up later on and used against me. So that's hard for me to want to share again
Mhm.
and be honest. I know you want me to be honest, but you even said on top of that that that's just who I am. I use stuff from the past. I bring things up from the past. So then I'm like, well, then I don't want to say it, you know?
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And what we got to when we were talking about it is that I felt exactly the same way. I don't want you to internalize something that would hurt your feelings, especially on something that's a sensitive topic, as well as be used against me. I don't know if it would, I don't know if it's your nature to throw it back at me like I would at you, but I think my biggest concern about being honest is how you would internalize it.
Yeah. And I think we'll probably get more into this, but I think honesty, and I've said this to you before when you want to maybe say things to, you saw something out in the world, maybe something going on, you're like, do I say something to that person or not, or to this? And I've always asked you, are you doing this because it's going to make you feel good, or are you doing it because you think it would just be impactful for that other person? Right? That's a different decision. If you're doing it from a selfish reason because I need to say because I want to get them, and I
But
think
let
I'm
me
going to get
ask
them.
you a question on that. So, we can use the example of what just happened on the Facebook thing that I asked you if I should say something. Basically, what happened was is somebody posted about wanting to get an iPad for their 4-year-old child, and that the instead of anybody answering her question, they just fucking went at her
Yeah.
about how could you get your 4-year-old an iPad. And I was just like, "Are you kidding me?" So I had a thought that I wanted to respond to it and let her know that how impactful an iPad can be for your child while within moderation, but recognizing like there's a lot of gifts that it can give your kid, especially if they have a different learning style. Jake's learned how to trace or count or whatever. So I asked you if I should say something, and you said yes. So, what is the difference between that question that you just asked, how will this impact somebody, when they're like 6 degrees of separation versus your partner, where it feels
Yeah.
really different?
Yeah. I think that's where it's different. But I think you can ask that same question in your relationship. Am I saying this thing honestly because it's going to make me feel good because I'm going to get them? Right? And I'm like, gotcha, or I'm gonna put them down and that makes me feel good. Or is this actually gonna benefit them? That I think it's actually gonna help them grow and it's gonna help our relationship become better. And if I can't
Like you
answer,
told me you need to get the fuck off Instagram.
yeah, like,
And I've been off and
and
I'm
that's not,
happy.
I'm not trying to say maybe in the past I've been like, I'm right. I know this work, right? But I really see how it's impacted you. And I thought it was going to be beneficial for you, for our relationships, for the relationship with our children. I thought it would do all those things. So that's why I thought it'd be necessary to mention that, right? If I didn't think those things, what's the point of saying it? Even if I in my head, like, I don't go on Instagram, look at me. But if I actually didn't think that was going to benefit you getting off of it and benefit us and all those things, then what's the point of sharing it? If that's my thought,
Hmm?
right? Is that a thought that's gonna just gonna piss you off and it's not gonna help us and it's gonna get us into a fight. So I don't think everything is worth sharing. Again, if I'm doing it selfishly, right?
Okay, that brings me to my next question then. So this is something else we've talked about is balancing our own needs while also respecting our partner and like recognizing that this may not be super beneficial for them, but it's really important to me, or it feels hurtful, or I have to get this out. And there have been things within our relationship that don't feel good for you to hear, but you want me to still tell you.
Hmm.
You've asked me to tell you. So I think that's challenging because there has to be a little bit of selfishness. The reason why I'm like kind of like jumbling is because I'm working through it in my head as we're talking. But
Let's go
well, I'm
example.
hold on. So what I'm thinking is if you are going to share something because it is for you, like this is something that is on your heart, something is it is a quote unquote selfish need or experience, and it has to do with being in your partnership and you need to share it to the other person and it may end up hurting. This is actually where I think is the partner's job to not make it about themselves.
Yeah, and that's hard too. But I would say to your point, it's also going to positively impact the relationship because if you are holding on to this thing that you need to say
Yeah.
and you're holding on to it, it's going to come out in the relationship.
And it may not be in words or in a nice conversation. It may
No,
come out in many other
it can
ways,
come
like
out
in a
right. So this is
forgiveness or in
still,
another
it might
form.
be a selfish thing, but it also, if you don't say this, it's going to hurt the relationship that
Yeah.
you don't say this. And
Yeah.
again, too, that's what I said the other night. My tendency, because I have this belief that maybe I'm not good enough, and that's underlying a lot of things, right? And so when you might say something that's a criticism or confrontation or something I did, I'm trying to take a step back and go, Nikki, this is about her and this isn't about me. And my tendency is to make it about me. And then what causes us to get in a fight is then I counter you, right? But I did this, or what about this? And it's nothing to do with that. The fight happens for not what we're actually trying to talk about,
Mhm.
is you have this feeling, and maybe I did something and the way you perceived it came out a certain way. And that's what you're telling me. And then I take it as I'm not good enough, I'm not doing enough, and then you lose. It's a lose-lose situation at
Yeah.
that point. So that's a really important point that you just said, is when someone's sharing with you about something on their heart or something that is feeling they have, it's not about you. It's about their experience that they need to share.
Right.
And you have to leave space for that and be curious and not go ego and take it in as this is about me. It's hard. I mean, that's
Yeah.
such a skill and so hard. It's emotional intelligence. It's a self-awareness. It's so many things.
Therapy.
Yeah,
It's therapy.
it's therapy.
We really learned this stuff within
Yeah, but
therapy.
I
It's
think
like,
that's the point. But I want to say back to what you said earlier. You needed to share that because it was actually impactful for the relationship,
mhm.
right?
And I think focusing on honesty in relationship to your feelings, right? And it's not blaming the other person. This is something you and I've talked about
Yeah,
too,
it's a
is
situation or
like
experience.
I feel this way because of this experience,
Yeah,
not you make me feel this
yeah.
way when
Because
this
no one can make you
happens.
feel a certain way. Do you agree with that?
I've learned I have had this sentence in my head since I was like 2 years old. So I understand. And I think with the more work that I've done personally, anything that I experience is based off my own stuff,
Yes.
right? It's not necessarily that
No. That
person's.
moment or that experience with that person might have triggered, but that's already been there for you.
Okay, let's go back.
Okay.
So let's go back to where we were in regards to like the career thing when you kind of don't, it's, I wouldn't call it telling the truth. I don't know if you want to call it a little white lie. And like in that regard, are little white lies ever okay? Right? It's like to tell your partner, oh, you look great. And maybe they don't.
I do think it's a
See, that's hard, right? Because here's the thing is it's really, really hard because as I'm again, why I'm taking so long to process this, because let's just say I put a swimsuit on and you say you look great in it. I am going to feel more confident. But if I'm not feeling that way myself, I may not fully believe what you have to say. In my opinion, it feels like radical honesty. I think that's what I expect. Like, I think I
I
expect,
was gonna ask you, like, kind of said mine. I think it's also based off our childhoods. Like mine is vastly different than yours, where and you can share more into it, where it wasn't as like we just say everything and anything to each other. Like, some things you just don't say and talk about.
yeah, and I don't think it needs to be every single thing. I think something that I struggle with having ADHD is that I don't have a strong filter for
Yeah,
things, but I've gotten better over the years to slow down and not say everything. But if I'm in a really heated state, I'm gonna just spit fire a
I
lot
know.
of stuff. I don't think everything needs to be said. I think we having privacy, right? Like, what's the difference between privacy and transparency?
Mm.
But I do feel like if I'm to come to you with a challenge or I'm feeling like I'm needing that second person's opinion or support, my expectation is that you're honest. And if it feels, I don't like the feeling, knowing that you may not have been honest about something.
Of course not.
I don't think you think about this in the same way that I do. So to me, when you choose a partner, and this is a partner you're going to have for life, this is again my idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Is
you married someone with that
is
idea.
that you will have not only like a partner that you can share honestly with, but the second part of that is that they are going to give you, like, they're what you see in the movies. They're going to be your rooting fans, or they're going to be right alongside you, or they're going to tell you the truth about something. But then it does raise the question about, you know, how do those words that you share impact me?
Yes,
Right.
because back to everything we talk about here, if someone hasn't done the personal work and takes everything personally and everything, I don't know if that's always helpful, right? That's why therapy's been so beneficial for us to have this mediator, like where you might be responding to something I'm saying in the way that if we didn't have her around, she's like, whoa, but she's able to pause us.
Well, I will say that as you were just saying that, I was thinking about, the years that you had done your own personal work and I had not gotten there yet, and probably how frustrating some of our conversations were for you because everything was really clear. And I can only relate to that now, me being on this other side where I see other people who are like stuck and I'm like, but it's so clear. But I can't say that, right? I can't because they need to work through it themselves, which is what
But
you're
but that's honesty, right?
Wait, so
Right?
there have been times where I've shared honesty to a certain extent, but if someone's not ready to, or willing to hear something, then
Yeah.
that's not, it's going to fall on deaf ears.
Yeah.
So, and then just to come all the way full circle, what you said earlier about like leaders and so forth is me coming to this myself.
It didn't work when I was trying to
It
tell you.
didn't work when you're trying to
Like if
tell
I was
me.
calling you out for something saying, because it comes as we said earlier, things I've said in the past come back to me. You go, I know what you're gonna say here, Jarrod. That's on you, right?
Mhm.
And I said that, and that wasn't the way I was approaching it before. Was not the way I should have approached it. But it's also that's a piece of this too. Is the way you deliver and communicate is also important, right?
Mhm.
Of how the honesty and how the communication is coming across. But it's so hard because there's the giver and there's the receiver, where each person at that moment, right? Obviously, you hopefully have in the relationship this foundation of love and trust that I know I'm not ever here to hurt you. Or I'm never here to hurt you with things that I'm saying, and that you hopefully know my heart and that my intention with anything I'm saying is to benefit you because I care about you deeply. And maybe it's not the right thing to say or not say in the moment, but it's always coming from this place. So how do we always separate? Sometimes I'm not good at delivering messages or communicating because I think too much in my head and worry about am I communicating it? Because back to the past stuff, sometimes I've said things I think I said what you wanted me to say, but it wasn't the right way, right? We talked about that. So then I get in my head about that too.
Mhm.
So there's just so many dynamics in it. But I think it's two things. It's the underlying foundation of the relationship, which I think we have that trust and know that we're always coming from a good place. And some things we're going to say things that hurt each other. That's just reality of a
Mhm.
relationship. But the second thing is where is that person at? Like if back to the personal work, our dynamic and our relationships gotten better for each of us doing individual work, right? At the end of the day and understanding that. So I don't think it's everything. Because there's some moments where like I could say this, but I can know it's not going to help this relationship. It's not going to help her. I'm doing it because I'm making me feel good. And I've said those things and I've seen what happens. And we get in a fight and it's not better on the other side of it. What are your thoughts? Because you were raised in a family that's can put everything out there, right? I see it. I see it even to this day. It's just honesty. And that works for you because you always come out on the other side of it,
Mhm.
right? And I think
So
that's
maybe that's what my expectation is for a partnership.
100%.
Yeah.
Like you say what's totally on your mind, but we've talked about this. Something that I have to do is be able to process,
Yeah.
which one thing you do, just go. But it's also, if you want to say something to somebody in the moment, it's going to come out in a certain way. But it's also being able, can I pause and go, okay, I think I want to say this, but let's actually think about it. Is this what I ask you, is this for me? Because I'm going to feel so much better by saying this because I got him. Or is this going to help us in our relationship?
But so, like, let's use the example that happened the other evening, right? So you wanted to say something, you didn't want to say it, you wanted time to process. And I pushed
You pushed.
for you to talk in the moment.
Yes.
And look how valuable that was.
I don't know yet. Is it? Was it valuable? Tell me why it was valuable.
I would say that this all happened over a holiday week. We're exhausted, Terrence.
We're
We're exhausted.
exhausted.
We're exhausted. And I can't remember what actually happened. Oh, I was baking pies and the crust was not up to my standard. I
Perfection
make
standards.
homemade crust for my pies. Anyways, I got really upset. This is after a really long day of parenting. I was at my max. I was really just exhausted. And so at that point, my bandwidth to going with the flow is very, very weak. I have very little battery for that. So I had a larger reaction than probably was necessary. And then it started a whole snowball of event of Jarrod and I getting into a disagreement. And then what we're just referring to now is he shared with me that I make big deals out of little things. And then I brought up to his attention that to me, they're not little things. To me, they feel like big things.
Yeah.
And again, we have to all look at our life's experience, our belief systems, our conditioned response, everything that we experience. There's a reason why my reaction to this pie crust not being what I want it to be is a big deal.
Yeah.
Right. But to Jarrod, it's not a big deal. But there are other things that may feel like more of a big deal to him that I would completely blow
And
off.
that's why I first didn't want to share.
Right. So he said that, but then it brought into the conversation about what we're talking about now,
Honestly.
about our belief systems, about why things are a big deal, and then honesty. And to be honest, to be honest, it is something that I internalized. It is something that I'm now thinking about, but at the same time, it is giving me a pause where I did not have necessarily before, which is like, is this really a big deal? Like, is this something that I can work through? Like, and so it's not always going to be available and accessible to me in those exact moments because I'm going to most likely go to default. At the same time, there's more information out there, and especially when it's coming from somebody that I respect and trust and love, it's going to land differently. And then the second thing you were really honest about was about Instagram and about how it's really impacting my mental health, our relationship, me, and like how overstimulated it is, how much it impacts me, specifically being ADHD. And I signed out of it that night. The point is that I've now been off it this whole holiday weekend, and it feels
Well, what you said was really important. I think it's easier to speak honestly and receive that honest from your partner when there's that trust and respect for one another.
yeah.
Like that's really crucial because it might hurt things that we say to each other, but you, as I said earlier, if you know it's coming from a place and there's this underlying foundation of love and trust of one another, then yeah, it might be hard to hear or hard to say, but you can always it should benefit. As
So
you
where
said.
does that leave you now? Like, are you more willing to be more honest?
I think at times, but still don't think it's everything.
No. I
Yeah.
don't think it's everything.
I think I can be, but I also think it's something I tried to use when I was a leader. Maybe I should use these, like, are you open to feedback? Are you open for me to be honest right now? Because if you're not open,
Yeah.
is that helpful?
Yeah, it's asking for permission.
Yeah, you got to ask for permission because you might not be in the state. And sometimes I might not be in the state
Yeah.
to receive it. And so it might be important that you do share it, but I might not be in a position to accept it.
Yeah.
And is that helpful?
Yeah.
But I also think to like what we're doing now, I think it's also to not let it be the end of the thing. Close the loop on it. It's like if I say something or you say something honestly, and it probably is going to affect the receiver. This is when do we come back and talk about it? Okay, I know I said that. Where are you now with it? I don't think a lot of times we do that. I don't think a lot of people do that. It's just said out there, and then it's kind of like, damn, that hurt. That was said, and then when do we come back to it? Luckily, we sometimes do because we have a platform to do therapy that helps us. But I think we need to do, because this is the first time we're coming back from that. And you're saying, it actually, and even when you said that thing about me making little things big, I was tough in the moment here. You said, I'm going to internalize this. But then when do we come back and go, have you thought about it? Where are you at now? But I think it will be helpful because then that also probably reinforces the giver to be like, okay, that wasn't that bad. Right.
Yep.
And maybe it was helpful.
Yep.
So maybe it reinforces more honesty. And then, because I just don't want you, as I said, I don't want you to internalize it and take it personally, which is hard. And I also don't want it to come back.
Yeah.
Which I don't like.
Yeah.
That hurts.
All makes sense.
Yeah. How does it make you think about this? Are you still the same? Do you have, like, is there moments that you've had in our relationship where you haven't said something?
Yes.
And why didn't you say something?
Didn't want to hurt you.
And when looking back, is it still the best decision?
I think what you just said about where we can share. We're lucky enough and fortunate enough to be able to have couples therapy. And with that, I think it creates a safe space to share certain things because she's there to mediate.
Yeah, she stops us. Like,
stops it.
She stops us. Like, one of us, like, nope, not your, like, don't go.
Yeah. From what I've really come to realize is that when I'm not honest, at least for the way my DNA works, is that it only impacts us worse.
Yeah.
So like I actually have to be. Again, it's not every single thing, and there are some things where I can be like, is this really worth it? But there are some elements, some experiences, some things that come up that if I don't share them and I try to just metabolize it myself, it will only combust in other ways.
Yeah.
So I think that's where I'm at with that.
Yeah. Well, I think what's important too, back to this, how this whole podcast goes, is an important lesson for me over this weekend that I learned was that when you are honest or giving me something about something I did or said, or right, I make it about me. Right. And so back to the personal work, I think it's really important when you think about yourself in a relationship is one, when you typically speak honestly, what is your intent typically? How are you approaching it? And there's probably multiple ways you're approaching it, but is it to get at that person or your partner? And then secondly, when you do get feedback from your partner, what is your typical response? Is it defensiveness? Like if you can learn about that and understand that about yourself and then understand about your partner, you can navigate those conversations because that's what therapies help us understand is how do we respond in those moments to know that it's neither about you or me. It's more about who we are as individuals and what has happened over our lifetime, that why I don't like getting feedback and what it makes me feel like I'm not good enough and how I get defensive and want to like say all the things I've done, right? It's me like countering it versus being open. So I think that's a great place to start is just reflect back on times where you've given it or received it. Why? Like how did you feel? Why were you giving or saying that to your partner? How did you receive other stuff that they gave to you? And if you can learn and maybe have a conversation about that first so we can be aware the next time. Because honesty is important. No doubt in a relationship. And I still don't think everything in the world needs to be shared.
Yeah, totally agree.
Cool. Anything else to share?
Nope.
All right. Well, thank you guys for listening. Please share with us, honestly, your feedback, comments. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Again, you're just hearing us. We still haven't figured it out, obviously. Obviously, we're still trying to figure it out together. But
Experience.
The human experience, alive and well, right here, right now. Thank you guys. Hope you had a great holiday, and we'll see you next time. Bye.